to the MITS webinar. I want to thank you for joining us this afternoon, and I'm going to turn it over to Colin Sherman for the presentation. Colin, please take it away.
All right. Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us today. If you're anything like me, you probably get about 37 webinar invites over the course of a week, and this is the one you've decided to attend, and I really appreciate it, and I know that Gary Brown does as well. Today we're going to talk about a topic that I really enjoy, which is cash. Specifically, we're going to talk about how to get more cash out of our distribution businesses using analytics. For those that don't know me, I'm the Director of Sales here at MITS. I've been with the company for about 17 years, and in that time I've always worked with the distribution market. I've visited tons of distributors. I've met them at trade shows. I've done over 1,000 demonstrations of our product. I've been on consulting calls. I've helped people with implementation. I've spent basically my entire adult life on analytics for distributors, and it's that experience that I'm excited to share with you guys today. For those that know me, you know that I do a lot of demos. This is not a demo. Far from it. This isn't going to be a sales pitch. I'm not going to talk about the features of our software at all. What I'm going to talk about is how to use data to get cash. That's what I'm going to talk about. So let's get rolling on that. First, humor me for 2 minutes, probably under that, more like 60 seconds. For those that don't know who we are, I want to just briefly mention who we are as a company. We're a 21-year-old software company out of Seattle. Beautiful picture there. For those that have been to Seattle, you know that that is definitely summer in the photo and not any other time of year, but still a beautiful photo nonetheless. What we do specifically for distribution is we have a package of software that lets our customers enable their users to get better access to data through two different things: the ability to make their own reports, trend, drill down, chart, analyze the data, even if those people aren't technical. And then also, because we're so ingrained in distribution, we actually already know most of the things you guys would ask us for, and we built it into the tool. So our product comes with hundreds, well, it's actually just over 1,000 reports, dashboards, and scorecards that are already designed, mapped, ready to go for SX.e. And by the way, we have 150 SX.e customers. So that's the closest thing to a sales pitch you guys will get today. This is really going to be more about sharing some information. Now, I'm going to presume that if you're here with me today, you acknowledge that data is important. Because of the way we wrote the invite, that was kind of the idea. The funny thing is, throughout distribution, what I see more often than not is people making decisions through gut instinct, people winging it, people not knowing or not wanting to put the effort into getting the data that they really need to make the best decision. If you connect that up with what all of the research over the past 20 years says about human beings, how human beings make decisions, which is we're not very good at it unless you give us a bunch of data to analyze, you'll realize that one of the biggest things distributors can do, especially in 2017, is shift their company to a more data-driven process. And what I'm specifically talking about today is ways to use data to get cash. That's what I'm talking about. And yeah, the examples I'm going to show are going to be in our software because that's what I know. And yeah, you'll see a bunch of our software, but again, not a demo. And also, the things I'm going to show, any really good business intelligence tool should be able to do for you. It doesn't have to be MITS. So let's talk about our agenda. What are we actually going to talk about? Well, when it comes down to it, there aren't that many ways to find cash, right? There's not that many ways. First of all, we'll talk about improving our inventory. And we'll talk about improving our inventory in two different ways. How are we going to reduce dead and dying stock, which, by the way, is the #1 asked about question in our sales process over the last decade. 2, we're going to talk about improving turns, and we're going to talk about improving turns through a type of report that, in my experience, very few people are currently looking at. We're also going to spend a minute to talk about the importance of turns and how turns affect our cash position. Second up is the most obvious, probably, to many people for finding cash, and that's selling more, right? And we're going to sell more by catching declining customers sooner and by reducing stockouts. And we're going to help struggling reps. And those three things come up all the time when we're working with new customers, those three things right there. And then The next up is improving margin, right? Even 1 percentage point better of your margin on a product group or on, a product category or for a customer or whatever ends up being a huge amount of money left at the end of the day. So when we're talking about improving margins, what are we going to do? Well, we're going to reduce overrides, which, by the way, roughly 75% of the people that we engage with as a sales department, about 75% of them are not doing, have a problem with overrides, and they're not doing anything about it. About 3/4 of our customers prior to having our product. We're also going to help reps maintain margin. That's another thing. 20 years ago, well, say 15, when I started selling MITS, nobody was showing their sales reps margin. Nobody was doing it. It was very, very rare. Now it's much more common, but showing the margin's not enough. We have to help them maintain margin, and we'll talk about that. Finally, let's talk about it. We're going to talk about expenses, right? If we're trying to find cash, one way to have more cash is to spend less of it. So when we do that, we need to track expenses as they're related to growth, and we also need to better manage expenses and cut costs. We'll talk about both of those things. So I'm going to go through examples of all of this and how we do it and how we look at it, and I'm going to do it with an actual customer's data from a company that has all of these things. All of these are relevant to that company's data, and that's going to be pretty fun. Before I do that, I want to share a really fascinating metric of my own with you that I think it's worth all of us talking about. We're all here because we believe that by better using data, we can do a better job of managing our business. That was kind of the cost to enter for this webinar here today. By reading the invite and thinking this would be worth it to you, you kind of acknowledge that that was the case. What does it mean? How do you quantify that? When you're at a distribution business, there's lots of decisions you make where you can literally quantify the outcome. If we can get products sooner, this is what that means. If we save money buying this product, that's what this means. What if we can reduce freight? Those are very, very specific things that we can understand. In 2014, a huge study was done on companies and what happens when they spend money on analytics. Here's what they found. Every dollar a company spends on analytics, it gets $13 back. You can Google that, by the way, Nucleus Research 2014. You'll find the study. It's huge. It follows all the principles of a study you'd want it to follow. It's a fantastic study. I bet some of you are looking at that number and thinking that that sounds ridiculous, that number is way too high. As we go through these examples from an actual customer of ours, in the data, as we go through these examples, I would like you all to think about each of these examples and what the return of doing that better, of finding those problems, what that return would be. Just think of it in your head as we go. Just add the numbers up. I think you'll be really surprised at just how much return we find just in the next 30 so minutes of examples. Okay, here comes the fun part. Let's talk about the examples. The first area I want to talk about is inventory. In talking about inventory, one of the things that I'm going to really talk about is improving turns. And everyone acknowledges when in the demo, in our process of working with them, that turns are important. As I dig into it and I ask more questions, people often struggle to articulate exactly what turns means to the business, right? So what I want to talk about is a little bit about turns, because several points in the demo, turns are going to come up. No, I'm sorry, it's not a demo. Several points in the presentation, turns are going to come up. I just got done telling you that it's not a demo. Believe it or not, it's still not a demo. So most distributors turn their inventory between 2 to 6. I forgot to quote the research there. I can get it for you if anybody would like it. 2 to 6 turns, okay? And one of the funny things about that is kind of, well, lower is really bad. Higher can also be bad as well. 7 or 8 or 9 turns can also be a problem, and we're going to talk about that as we go into the demo. What does it actually mean to improve turns to the business? What does it actually mean? Well, let's say we had $2 million in inventory, and it's turning at a 3, okay? So right in the middle of that 2 to 6. That would support $6 million in sales, okay? What if we increased that turn number to 4? From 3 to 4 means that now, instead of having to have $2 million in inventory to support that $6 million in sales, we now only need $1.5 million in inventory. which means we literally have more cash to work with. In this case, $500,000. So when we talk about turns, even a small change moves the needle in an enormous way. And as I go through my examples, you'll see turns constantly coming up. Okay. So let's take a look at the examples now, and then we'll come back and we'll do questions. Again, as I go through, enter your questions over on the right, and we'll get to those a little later in the presentation. Okay, first up, we're going to talk about inventory, like I said, and we're going to talk about dying and dead stock. Why do I call it dying and dead stock? Well, because over 17 years, I've been asked to show people and talk about dead stock a lot. And it took a bunch of those years for me to realize that I, as a giant data nerd, was bothered by the concept of dead stock. And I wasn't bothered by it because, hey, this is an annoying problem, which it is. I was bothered because it's so black and white. This is, Colin, we want to see what we haven't sold in a year that we have on hand. In a year. And what I realized was if we broaden that report and make it really interactive, one of the things that we could do is make it so that you can catch products on their way to dead stock. You can catch what you could call dying stock. So let's take a look at a report that you could make for yourselves or run in an EBI tool you wanted. Low sales on-hand value by product. So here we're looking at all of our product groups. That's product category to all you SX.e folks. Same thing, different vocabulary. So we're looking at all of our product categories, and we've got them ranked by how much we have in on-hand value. And then we've got the top 10 products under each one ranked by on-hand value with sales right next to it with a couple filters on it. And the filters are saying, show me everything where we have more than $0 of on-hand value and less than $1,000 in sales. Now, one of the things you should think about is when you have a report like this, go ahead and change those filters all the time. Don't just look at $1,000 in sales like this one example that we're about to talk about. Look at what do I have $20,000 of on hand and less than $5,000 in sales. That $5,000 in sales might look great on a sales report until I realize that I've got 4 years worth of it in inventory. And by the way, there's that turns number again, right? Looking at this top product here, TripleFax, for our company that we're going to all now, let's all remember, the examples I'm showing are from an actual company. So part of our demo here is going to be all of us using our imagination to think of ourselves as being part of this company, and then taking what we learned from that and applying it in our heads to our own companies. Okay? So we got TripleFax here where there's $12,800 on hand, and there's $600 in sales. That $600 in sales is enough to make sure it won't show up on that dead stock report, and yet it's a real big problem. There's 25 years worth of this product in inventory, and by the way, when we sell it, it's at 48% margin, which is great news if we were ever selling it. The GMROI is awful, the turns is 0. By the way, everything you have in inventory with a 0 turn, certainly hurting that turns number. The other thing that we can do here, and I'm just going to do this really quick, is I'm going to add in average on-hand value. Because the other thing you're going to want to look at when you do this in your business is make sure to add on the average that you've had of that product going back in time. Because it's not enough to say, we have a whole bunch of it and we're not selling it. It's also helpful to know how much you're used to having of it, which is $9,000, and right now we got 13. So I have 2 problems here, right, in our company. I've got an issue that we're not selling something that we're carrying quite a bit of inventory, and I have another issue that is someone's buying it, buying more of it. So if we can put a stop to people buying it, that's immediately cash into the business. And then if we can also do something about this $12,000 of inventory nobody appears to want, then that will put money into the business as well. So let's go look at that actual product and see, here are the people that are buying it. Here's who bought it before that are buying most of it now. So take this list of people that are buying it and go to them and say, hey, I'm going to stop carrying TripleFax because no one's buying it. Before I get rid of it, I know you've bought it in the past. Would you like it, right? Any amount of money that you can reduce of that dead stock to that customer is found cash, because it's right now it's dead. It's not going to do anything. So that's our first example. Remember, think about what that means to you guys. You can go make this report, and you can do that, make that impact right away. The second thing I want to talk about is a really interesting way to improve turns. There's lots of ways to improve turns. And one of the ways that very few people look at is how do I improve turns based on how my vendors are actually servicing me. Let's think about that in another way. Let's say that you've got a product that can get to you very, very quickly, and then you've got another product that takes a long time to get to you. It makes no sense to buy both of those products at the same frequency, right? It just wouldn't make sense. If you know that a product can get to you quickly, maybe you can move from buying it every month and a half or 2 months to buying it every 3 weeks. And I'm not saying you're buying more of it, you're just buying it more frequently. And that will up your turns, right? Here's the funny thing about that, though. You can't do that unless you have really good data on the vendors, right? Unless you know for sure when they're going to get it to you, because otherwise you're going to be left high and dry. So here is a report that shows all of our vendors. Now this says product supplier. All you SX.e people, it's called vendor, that's fine. Here's all of our vendors. Here's our on-hand value, okay, as of right now of the product from those vendors. Here's our sales, okay. Here's our turns, and here's our average lead time. So effectively what we're saying is, for this vendor here, we're turning it at a 4, and it takes 15 days to get us more product. If I go down into that and look at the actual product categories that we deal with from that vendor, I can look through them at the individuals for each of them. And like, for example, if it takes us 8 days to get it, and we're turning it at a 4, and it's $170,000 in sales, we have 20 grand on hand, couldn't we buy that more often and raise the turns, right? This is the sort of data I can dig into, and because I can do reports on this and I can acknowledge that this is how long it takes the vendor to get me the product, I can make decisions based on that. Okay, so that's a couple examples from the inventory section. What I'm going to do now is go over to sales. And when I started selling MITS a long time ago, early 2000s, everybody asked me about sales reporting exclusively. And you'll notice that sales isn't first in this because I wanted to make sure you guys saw some inventory stuff up first. Now that we're talking about sales, I want to share another piece of the studies that I've been reading with you. And it's distributors lose 50% of their customers naturally over 5 years. So it's 50% over 5 years. Now the problem is knowing who that 50% is going to be. And then the study continued, only 1 out of 26 actually complain or let you know they're making a change. 1 of 26. Let's flip that around and look at it in a much more jaded light. 25 out of 26 of your customers that are going to leave you aren't going to tell you. For one, I don't know if you know this, but people don't like confrontation. They don't like that. So how are we going to stop that? How are we going to find out about it right away? When I started selling MITS, I used to ask people, if 2 of your top 10 customers are buying less from you today than they were buying before, how would you find out? How quickly and how would it happen? And the answers for a lot of distributors is really rough. Beat your competitors by being one of the companies that does a better job of that. So we got reports here that says declining sales year to date over last year to date. This is showing for each of our sales reps the customers that are declining year over year. It's that simple. Just go in and look at customers that are declining year over year. And I'm just going to quickly make this report show me all of the reps by showing me the top 10 of each one. So we've got the top 10 customers for each rep, and we can go through this. And one of the really interesting things that will show up when you dig into the data is that, sure, it makes sense that this guy who's down 4% himself year over year has got customers that are down. But one of the things that often doesn't get attention is the sales reps that are up in sales also have problems. So like Jim Cooper is literally selling more this year than he sold last year. You can see last year's sales, the year before sales, and he's up 1%, right? One of his customers has dropped $117,000 year over year. Does he know that? Is he trying to fix it? What's happening? You can take any of these customers that are declining, like SDK here is $35,000 drop. You should go in and you should look at what specifically that customer is buying, and you should sit down with the rep and strategize it. Why aren't they buying $28,000 of ZooHex anymore? Do we not carry pump control zoom phase anymore? Are they getting it somewhere else? Is it obsolete? Is there a new product? There's stuff we can dig into here, and we can find out if we can get any part of that $28,000 back. And I'm not saying that all of your customers that are declining are solvable problems, right? They might be declining because they're in trouble. The thing is, you only have to fix a small percentage of that list to see a huge impact on your business. If you take a list of all of your declining customers and you solve 2 people on that list, you'll be ecstatic, because that's a whole bunch of money back to your business. All right, so that's our first example here that's all about declining customers and catching them. Our second one is something that recently has been coming up a lot more, and it's stockouts. Stockouts are a really interesting problem from a data point of view, because SX.e, like most ERP systems, isn't tracking that data the way you want. You can't go into SX.e and say, hey, show me a report that says every time I missed out on a sale because I didn't have something in inventory, unless you literally have your salespeople or order takers documenting that. And if you do, good on you. You guys are great, and you can kind of zone out for the next couple minutes till my next example, because that's awesome. But most companies don't have that in place. So how do we know when things are stocking out? Let's think about the value of a stockout. The most obvious thing is that we're not selling it, right? It didn't sell, so we didn't get the money from it being sold. There's another piece to it that I think is a bigger deal, and it's on the customer service side. It's the idea that if a customer comes to get something that they need right now and we don't have it, they're probably going to find it somewhere else because they need it. And I've visited a lot of distributors, and I've noticed something kind of funny. A lot of you are across the street or a block away from your competitors, right? A lot of you have competitors that are literally right there, and if I was looking for the product, I would probably go to the competitor, right, if I were the customer. So that's an even bigger concern. You could lose the lifetime value of that customer from simply not having that item. So what are we going to do? How are we going to solve that? Well, the first thing I'm going to do is find a report. You can't look at every SKU in your company, like one by one, to solve this problem. You need to come up with a way of looking at the best products. So let's go to our inventory reports, and let's run a report that's the 10 most profitable products by dollars. This is showing all of our product categories ranked, excuse me, this is showing all of our product categories ranked by the profit they generated in the last 12 months. And then underneath each product category, it's showing the top 10 products ranked by the profit that they've generated in the last 12 months. So let's look at this product right here, Indigo Zap, right? This is a great product, $150,000 in profit, great. 800 GMROI, that's really great too. The company's GMROI is only 165. 11.5 turns, wow, that sounds awesome. Company's turns are only 3. $60,000 on hand, $360,000 in sales. Wow, this product must be fantastic. Except remember earlier when I said that sometimes if your returns are high, it's a whole nother problem. I had an opportunity to show this report to the president of the company that this data came from, and he immediately saw those numbers and knew that he had a stockout problem just by looking at that, at the numbers that are on the screen there. That's not enough for me. Let's go deeper and see if there actually is a stockout problem. One of the big concerns of having really high turns is that you have periods of time where you don't have those products. So let's go over here, and we're going to jump over to an entire picture. We found a product we need to know more about. Let's go to a picture of what's happening for that product on a scorecard that we call the Product 360 scorecard, and it's got a bunch of different info about the product from how we sell it to how we buy it. In the middle of this scorecard, it shows the history of us purchasing the item and the history of us selling the item without having a list of specific times where we lost business, which remember, I know that most of you don't have. This is a way to get a feel for that on hot products because you can go in and see the pattern of buying them. We bought a whole bunch in January. We sold a whole bunch in February. Then our sales went to 0. We bought a whole bunch in March and April. Then we sold a whole bunch in April. Then our sales went to 0. Then we bought a whole bunch in July and August, and we sold a whole bunch in July and August. So what we're seeing here is a pattern of buying it, selling it, buying it, selling it, buying it, selling it, and each time we sell it, we go to 0. So we're going to 0 on one of our hottest products, a product that turns at a 12, a product with a GMRI of 800. What do? Well, we buy more of it. We buy in bigger bulk or we buy more often depending on the lead time, like we talked about earlier. And when we buy more of it, we also make sure that we're getting a better price. By getting the better price, we're also going to improve our margins, which is the next section, so we'll come back to that. But just by having more of it, what does it do to cash in our business, right? These sales months, $90,000, $90,000, $60,000, what if we just took one of these months up to 50 grand? What if we just did that? Then we found $50,000 for our business. What if we took 3 of these months up to 50 grand? Then we found $150,000 of revenue, which of course, whatever margin you guys deal with will shake down to the profit. Think about for a moment before I continue on what that solves to you. I will tell you from my point of view that distributors are much more concerned with dead stock than they are with this example I just showed you. And this example that I just showed you is a bigger deal that's easier to solve. Start here. All right, so the third part of our sales examples is struggling sales reps. I am regularly asked by our customers and by our prospects, how do I help our sales reps who are struggling? We have a bunch of resource into them. We don't just want to let them go. And they're down year over year, and how are we going to fix that? Well, first of all, we need to really get in there and look at the data with that person and really try to understand specifically what's happening. If you don't have evidence, you don't have anything. As I go over to this here, I'll share that one of my big mentors early in my career here, every time I tell him, I think this is happening. I think I've got this problem. Every single time he'd say, what evidence do you have of that? Because we're humans and we come up with stories to make ourselves feel more comfortable. We come up with information, maybe true, maybe not, that makes us feel better about a situation, and you've got to look for the evidence. This is a dashboard showing our sales performance for our company, and down here it says which reps are down. So we see a rep is down 5% year over year, and we're going to go look at that rep and see what's actually happening. Because we need to know as much detail as we can to solve this problem. It's not just, hey, you need to sell more or you're fired. It's, why are these customers declining? And you can literally sit with your rep and you can ask about each and every one. Why did UWR buy $37,000 less from this year, basically going away? Why do you have a $20,000 drop from Stephen Cross? And listen to what they say. They might know things that you don't know. There's the Kaizen thing, right, where the person closest to the problem is the person who is best going to be able to fix it. This is you talking to the person who's closest to the problem with the proper data. And not just from the customers, but from the product groups. It doesn't make much sense to me that this sales rep would have had success selling Fixway, which is a product category, 2 years ago, and then not this year. Do we not carry it anymore? Did we replace it? Is there some problem where the sales rep and the vendor rep for the manufacturer aren't getting along? Not that that never happens, right? So what we can do is we can sit down and come up with a strategy of how we're actually going to address this. All right. Next section is margin. And as we talk about margin, we have to think about, and let's go back to that scorecard we were just at. I want you guys to think about a quote that my boss told me that I really, really enjoy, which is, we don't get what we expect. We get what we inspect. And that comes back to the kind of the value of what, kind of the general value of this presentation that I keep talking about, which is, it's not about sitting around thinking, this is going to be great. I know we're going to sell a lot because we have these hot products and we got these customers that want them, and I know everything is going to be okay. It's not about that. It's about inspecting and digging in and making sure that's going to be okay. And as we think about margins, right, we look at this list down here in the middle of the screen that's the sales reps of potential issues. And these are people, these are reps ranked with margin drop on them, right? So yeah, most of our reps are down in margin a little bit year over year. That's not great. Jose Hernandez is down 7% year over year. So as I go into Jose, I'm going to try to figure out a way to help him with that. And something that you need to think about is how you communicate this information to your reps. If you're just telling them, hey, you're expected to sell it at this margin and you're not, go fix it, nothing's going to happen for most reps. You can write it on his whiteboard. You can write it on a piece of paper, have him put it in his wallet. That might be better. What you need to do is have an immediate hit, an immediate thing that tells Jose he's not meeting expectations every day. And it needs to be crystal clear. For that, I suggest that you make an actual scorecard of what's going on for that rep, and you make it their home screen. You make it so that when they log into the computer, it's the first thing that they see. And rather than writing a number on a whiteboard, how about some stoplights? Cognitively, it is much easier for human beings to process a simple color or a simple picture than it is to think about numbers. Smiley face, unsmiley face, right? Versus numbers. So you can come up with ranges, and you can make stoplights for yourself in whatever tool you use that says, hey, if it's over this particular amount, let's say it's green. If it's between these two numbers, let's make it yellow. And if it's above this number, let's make it red. So then we can sit down with Jose when it's our one-on-one time, and we can say, hey, 23% margin right now. And that's 4% lower than you've sold over the last 12 months. And by the way, 8% lower than it was last month. And we would want to sit down with Jose, and we'd want to drill into that and really dig into it, right? It's probably not the 35% margin he got from his biggest customer, but it could be the 26% he got from his second biggest customer, right? And that leads us into our next example, which is overrides. Because what this is not showing you, and what sales reports often obfuscate from you being able to see, is, are we having an override problem? Like I talked about earlier, about 3/4 of the distributors I talk to have an override problem, and of those 3/4, almost none of them are doing something about it, because it's a difficult problem. So what you need to do is get yourself some reports on overrides. Let me give you an example of what we have here. So this is a pricing dashboard. And it talks about how are we pricing things, how did we intend to price things, what are we overriding, are we overriding more or less than we did before, and all that stuff we need to, in general, basically slow down overrides as a company. What I want to talk about right now, though, is we're talking about how to help this rep with, right, and how to find out, is this rep having a margin problem because of overrides? This is a simple report showing what percentage of overrides each of these customers is responsible for. And just because Kenneth is the biggest, the guiltiest abuser of the override system, doesn't mean that that's a problem. Look at the margin that was there at the end of those overrides, 27%, okay? Remember Jose, who we were talking about? 23%. So his overrides end up being business that's 4% lower in margin than Kenneth Jackson. 4% of your sales, right? That's a huge amount difference. So let's go look at this report, and let's find out who Jose is actually overriding for. Because again, the top one may not be the problem, or in this case, maybe it is. Jimmy Miller is the most overridden customer for Jose. 26% of the overrides he does. At the end of the day, that customer ends up being 9% margin. This is a customer that is getting special treatment. Do you know that they're getting special treatment? Does Jose know that they're getting special treatment? Finding those special treatment situations is a big deal when we're trying to move the needle for our business. And I only have just a few minutes left, but I do just want to quickly mention on this that we had a president of a company ask us for a report like this to find out if a fishing trip his biggest customer and his biggest sales rep were going on each year was even a good idea. And it turned out that he was making less money on that customer each year than that fishing trip cost. So that's our second margin example. And what I want to end on here is expenses. When I see how people are managing expenses at distributors, it strikes me that you can't do analysis on one data point. It's not about how much are we spending right now. It's not even how much did we spend in the last year. How does that compare to previous years? How does that compare to the month over month? How do we look at the trends here? Because the whole thing you need a lot of data to get a really clear picture. So this is a dashboard pulling from the profit and loss data in SX.e, and it's showing expense data. And there's two things I'm going to show you on this dashboard, and then we're going to go do questions. So if you've got questions, go ahead and enter them in for me. I'm going to rattle through as many of them as I can in 5 minutes, and I would really love to answer your questions. So starting up, we've got year-to-date over last year expenses, okay? Our expense trend is up 26%. If that's the only metric we're looking at, things sound terrible. It even has a red light next to it, right? But what if we could look at that and think about the fact that revenue is up 29% and profits up 2%? Is that expense number still as worrisome? Well, expenses as a percentage of revenue trended is down 2%. So if we do a metric that literally looks at more than one type of data, we can find out that things aren't as terrible as we might have thought. We still should try to cut back on those expenses, though. And to do that, we might want to look at our expenses year-to-date over last year that have increased the most and drill into them and figure out why are we spending so much more money, or look at month-over-month increases. I know that sounds really like detailed and really specific, really tactical. The goal here is to make sure that things are the biggest increases month over month don't end up being the biggest increases year over year, right? So we can kind of look into those. And then finally, a lot of you probably want to look at this by branch, right? So when you look at it by branch, you can go into individual branches, and you should in your company, and look at the expenses for that branch and figure out, you know, what did we spend more on? Is it different by branch? I have a little bit of an example there, but I don't have the time to go into it. But I was going to go in and show you, you know, just because you're spending a lot more on freight at one branch doesn't mean you're spending a lot more on freight at another. All right, we have about 5 minutes left. I'm going to go back to my slides here. And I'm going to I'll put this up again so you guys can see it and take any notes you might have missed on it. We talked about improving inventory by reducing our dead and dying stock. And by looking at what our lead times by vendor are to buy more often in order to up our turns number. When it comes to increasing sales, what we did there is we talked about catching declining customers faster. We talked about reducing stockouts, and we talked about helping those reps that might be having a bad year. The third thing is that we talked about reducing overrides and helping reps maintain margin. And then finally, under expenses, we talked about tracking expenses as they related to growth and better managing expenses and cutting costs. So I really appreciate everybody for coming today. I really do. Again, I'm Colin Sherman. This is my contact info if you have questions directly for me. This is not a sales pitch, as I said. If you did like pieces of what you saw and you want to talk to me about what we do as a company, please reach out. I'm happy to do a more demo-y demo for you about how this all works with SX.e. I'm the person who worked with a lot of the 150 SX accounts that we have. I know a lot about that market. I'm happy to help you. What I'm going to do now is rattle through about 3 or 4 minutes worth of questions. Just for everybody's benefit, there's a lot of customers on here, not just prospects for us. So some of the questions are kind of customer-centric. So let's take about 3 minutes here. Are these standard MITS reports? If so, how do we get them? Everything I showed is a standard report in MITS. One of them is a report I made for the demo, but you can make it out of the MITS system without any customization. The vendor lead time thing is something you can make. If you don't have them, reach out to your rep here. I think all the SX.e customers work with a gentleman here named John Podroberic. Reach out to him. He'll be happy to help you. You might just be missing a version that you need to upgrade to. Second question, is the expense trends dashboard custom or another name in the dashboard library? The expense trends dashboard is not custom. It is part of our standard offering. If you don't have it, it's probably because you don't have the modules that are underneath it. Again, reach out to John, and if you don't have John's contact info, shoot me an email and I'll pass your question on to John. Another question was how much of this can be done day one? Oh, if you were to get MITS, all of this, everything I showed is there from day one. So you could do all of this on the first day. And then somebody has a question about the 13-to-1. That's Centurus, I believe is the name of that. Let's go look together. Nexus? I always get the name confused. nucleus research. That's the study that you want to go look at. Okay. I really appreciate everybody's time today. Like I said, I know you get a lot of webinar invites and that you're just really busy. And I really appreciate the questions. There's no more coming in, so I'm probably going to wrap it up there. Thank you so much. Please, if you don't mind, shoot me an email. Let me know what you thought. This is a brand new presentation that I haven't done before, and I'd like to get some feedback on it so that I can improve and get better myself. And thank you. Oh, someone's talking. Oh, maybe not. Okay. Thank you, everybody. Have a fantastic day. I hope we all get to speak soon. Bye now.
Thank you, Colin. Take care.